Picture this. You're sitting on the couch. You look at your dog and ask a simple question. Do you want to go for a walk? Instantly, their head snaps up. Then it happens. That dramatic, angled head tilt. The eyes go wide. The ears shift. It is undeniably adorable. It feels deeply, profoundly human. And you probably think you know exactly what it means. You assume they are confused. You assume they are struggling to understand your weird human words. Or maybe you think they are playing you, using a calculated dose of cute to manipulate your emotions. But behavioral neuroscience tells a completely different story. What is happening inside your dog's brain is a biological marvel. From the moment we brought wolves into our fireside camps, we began anthropomorphizing them. We project human flaws onto canine behaviors. The most pervasive myth? That the head tilt is a sign of bewilderment, a lack of comprehension. But science proves the exact opposite. The head tilt is not a neurocognitive indicator of confusion. It is a biological biometric of intense sensory processing. It is pattern matching. It is memory retrieval. When your dog tilts their head, they are executing an act of high-order cognitive concentration. They are hyper-focused. Let's destroy another myth: dominance. Based on deeply flawed mid-20th century captive wolf studies, dominance theory incorrectly frames a dog's sustained gaze as a challenge. People think a staring, shifting dog is trying to assert alpha status. This is unequivocally false. In domestic dogs, a sustained gaze paired with a head tilt is the ultimate expression of hypersociability. Look at the biomechanics. When a dog tilts its neck, it physically exposes the jugular and carotid arteries. It is a posture of absolute physical vulnerability. It completely contradicts the combative mechanics of an aggressive display. They aren't challenging you. They are surrendering to listen. So why the angle? Why the physical rotation? It starts with the physics of sound. Mammalian ears are incredible at mapping sounds on a horizontal plane. Left to right is easy. But the vertical plane? Elevation is incredibly difficult for the brain to parse. When you speak, your dog needs to know exactly where the sound is originating. By tilting their head, they alter the position of their ear flaps, the pinny. This creates a microscopic fractional time delay between the two ears. The auditory cortex instantly calculates this interaural time difference. They tilt their head to triangulate your voice. It is pure biological radar. But the brain does more than just locate the sound. It actively decodes it, and it does so asymmetrically. A landmark 2013 study by researchers at the University of Bari in Italy proved exactly how canine brains process human speech. Using a behavioral head-turning paradigm, Dr. Marcello Siniscalchi and his team played altered human voices to dogs. The results were staggering. Dogs process the meaning of familiar words using their left cerebral hemisphere, but they process the emotional intonation using their right hemisphere. This lateralization means a right-sided tilt often indicates they are desperately trying to parse the actual semantic definition of your words. It gets deeper. The head tilt is a physiological signature of a phenomenon called cross-modal matching. This is the brain's attempt to link an auditory word to a stored visual image. A 2021 study out of Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary documented this brilliantly. Researchers at the Family Dog Project analyzed 40 dogs. 7 of these were gifted word learners, capable of memorizing dozens of specific toy names. The statistical divergence was massive. When commanded to fetch a specific toy, the gifted dogs tilted their heads 43% of the time. The typical dogs? Only 2%. The tilt means they are actively digging through their visual memory files. There is a visual barrier too. Look at your dog's face. That beautiful, prominent muzzle. It actually creates a central blind spot in their lower binocular field of vision. It obscures the lower half of your face. Why does that matter? Because dogs, just like humans, rely heavily on mouth movements and facial expressions to interpret communication. In 2015, a University of British Columbia behavioral study mapped the morphology of 582 dogs. They found that 71% of dogs with long muzzles, like greyhounds and retrievers, frequently tilted their heads. But only 52% of flat-faced dogs like pugs did the same. The tilt physically rotates their snout out of their line of sight. Because this isn't just psychology, it's chemistry. The head tilt is entirely mediated by the autonomic nervous system. When you use a known phonetic marker, like walk or treat, it triggers your dog's mesolimbic reward pathway. This causes an acute, massive spike in dopamine. Anticipation floods their brain. Simultaneously, the sustained eye contact required for this behavior triggers a powerful oxytocin feedback loop. According to Azabu University researchers, this oxytocin surge literally lowers the dog's cortisol levels. It synchronizes their heart rate variability with yours. To truly understand this, we must look backward, deep into the late Pleistocene. We must trace the evolutionary divergence of the domestic dog from the gray wolf. Gray wolves almost never display communicative head tilts toward humans. Early domestication forced a massive paradigm shift. Dogs had to transition from conspecific communication, wolf to wolf, to heterospecific communication, dog to human. The wolves that survived in ancient human camps were the ones capable of accurately reading our acoustic and visual cues. They learned to read us to secure caloric resources. They adapted to survive. Consider the Bonn-Oberkassel dog burial in Germany, dated to roughly 14,200 years ago. Here, a domestic dog was lovingly buried with human companions. This archaeological site represents the evolutionary crucible, the exact timeline where deep, emotional, socio-cognitive bonding was already permanently established. The head tilt was forged around these ancient campfires. It is an artifact of ancient survival, a hyper-attentive, orienting behavior that separated the wolf from the dog forever. But the willingness of a dog to stop, focus heavily on a human face, and physically tilt its head isn't just learned. It is hardwired into their genetic code. In 2017, whole genome sequencing at Princeton University revealed something completely mind-blowing. Researchers compared domestic dogs against human socialized captive wolves. They found specific structural variants in genes on canine chromosome 6. Genes known as GTF2I and GTF2IRD1. Why is this critical? Because in humans, mutations in this exact genomic region are profoundly significant. In humans, this genomic deletion causes Williams-Buren syndrome. It is characterized by intense, stereotypical hypersociability. People with this syndrome exhibit intense, sustained eye contact and a profound desire to interact. Sound familiar? These genetic insertions directly explain why your dog is biologically compelled to engage in the focus required to elicit a head tilt. It is a literal genetic mutation for love. Their DNA demands it. Then comes the domestication syndrome. When ancient humans selected wolves for tameness, it caused mild deficits in neural crest cell migration during embryonic development. This changed their physical morphology forever. It resulted in diminished ear cartilage, floppy ears. A dog with pendulous, floppy ears has entirely different acoustic dynamics than a wolf with erect ears. They literally have to tilt their heads more dramatically just to clear their ear canals and localize high-frequency human sounds. Domestication reshaped their anatomy. But there is a dark side to this behavior, and as a pet parent, you must be hyper-vigilant. We must make a strict clinical distinction between a dynamic behavioral head tilt and a static pathological head tilt. A behavioral tilt is transient. It is stimulus-driven. It vanishes when you stop talking. But if your dog's head tilt becomes continuous or appears suddenly without auditory stimulation, it is a massive red flag. A static head tilt means the animal has a physiological inability to maintain a parallel horizon. It is a warning of neurological failure. If your dog presents with a sudden, severe head tilt, especially if accompanied by stumbling, vomiting, or rapid involuntary flicking of the eyes, known as nystagmus, seek immediate veterinary care. This strongly indicates an asymmetric lesion in the peripheral vestibular system. The vestibular system maintains the body's orientation with gravity. Often, this is caused by otitis interna, deep inner ear infections that rupture the tympanic membrane, or it signals damage to the vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve 8. It is deeply disorienting and painful. In older dogs, this sudden, terrifying tilt is often diagnosed as idiopathic geriatric vestibular syndrome. It presents overnight. One moment they are fine, the next they cannot stand up without rolling. While visually horrifying, it is usually benign and self-resolving. However, if the static tilt is accompanied by changes in mentation, or the dog starts knuckling over on their paws, it signals central vestibular disease. This indicates severe damage to the brainstem or cerebellum. It could be a stroke, it could be inflammatory brain disease, or it could be a brain tumor. But there is one more red flag, one that is silent, slow, and utterly heartbreaking. It isn't the appearance of a permanent head tilt. It is the sudden, permanent disappearance of the dynamic head tilt. If your senior dog stops orienting to your voice, if they no longer tilt their head when you say their favorite words, do not ignore it. The sudden cessation of orienting reflexes to familiar voices is a primary hallmark of canine cognitive dysfunction, CCD. It is the canine equivalent of Alzheimer's. CCD is driven by the brutal accumulation of beta-amyloid plaques in the cerebral cortex and hippocampus. As these plaques spread, they literally destroy the neural pathways responsible for cross-modal matching and memory retrieval, the very neurological systems mapped by scientists. The dog physically loses the cognitive ability to associate your words with meaning. The memory file is gone. And so, the behavioral head tilt vanishes. It is a devastating fading of the mind. Watch for this loss. Protect them in their twilight. When your dog sits in front of you, locks eyes, and tilts their head, they are not confused. They are not challenging you. They are executing a biomechanical masterpiece of evolutionary history. They are shifting their visual blind spots. They are triangulating the acoustics of your voice. They are surfing a wave of dopamine and oxytocin. They are scanning their memory banks, desperate to perfectly match your sound to a meaning. They are trying, with every fiber of their genetically mutated being, to understand the human they love. It is the culmination of a 14,000-year-old promise, a deeply rooted instinct forged by the ancient ancestors of our firesides. Every tilt is an echo of survival, of a wolf that learned to read a human face. So next time it happens, don't just laugh it off. Appreciate the profound neurobiological effort happening in that little skull. They are giving you their absolute, undivided attention. In a world full of noise, you are the only sound that matters. If your dog does the famous head tilt, I want to know exactly what word triggers it. Drop the word in the comments right now. Does it lean left or right? Pay attention this week. The science of the dog is constantly evolving. In our next video, we are diving into why dogs circle before they lie down. You probably think it's just about getting comfortable, but the evolutionary science behind it is even stranger than you'd expect. Make sure you are subscribed. Keep observing, keep protecting. See you next time.